I never thought a simple evening could shatter my world. It was a quiet return from Aunt Linda's retirement party. The house was silent, almost eerily so, as I walked in. Marcus, my husband of 3 years, was sprawled on the couch, absorbed in his phone. "Hey, Evie," he mumbled without looking up. I forced a smile, my mind elsewhere. I headed straight for our bedroom, my thoughts on the cherished watch my late father had given me on my 21st birthday. It was worth more than $12,000, but its sentimental value was priceless. He had scrimped and saved for years to buy it for me, his only daughter. Each time I wore it, I felt his presence, his love. But as I opened the drawer where I always kept it, my heart sank. It was gone. Just gone. Panic surged through me. "Marcus," I called out, my voice trembling. He appeared in the doorway, his casual demeanor a stark contrast to my growing despair. "What's up?" he asked, finally looking up from his phone. "The watch. My watch is gone." I could barely get the words out. His eyebrows knitted in confusion. "Are you sure? Maybe you misplaced it?" "Misplaced it? I always kept it in the same spot. How could it just disappear?" "No, Marcus, it's been stolen. We need to call the police." I was near hysterical now, but Marcus shook his head, a strange certainty in his voice. "No need for that, Evie. It's definitely here in the house. Don't worry." His words hit me like a cold slap. How could he be so sure? Doubt and suspicion began to creep into my mind, mingling with my distress. And then it hit me. Clara, his mother. "You think your mother took it, don't you?" The accusation spilled out before I could stop it. Clara had always admired the watch, a little too keenly for my comfort. Marcus's face hardened. "Don't start with that, Evie. Mom wouldn't do such a thing." But I was beyond listening. My mind raced with anger and betrayal. Clara, with her nosy ways and her constant interference in our lives, it had to be her. "I'm calling the police," I declared, my decision firm. "No, Evie, don't." Marcus's voice was sharp, but I was already dialing. I reported the theft, my hands shaking. As I hung up, Marcus just stared at me, a mixture of disbelief and anger on his face. "I can't believe you just did that," he said quietly. I wanted to scream, to cry, to lash out, but instead, I stood there, feeling the first cracks in our marriage. The watch was gone, but something more valuable had been lost. Trust. As Marcus retreated to the living room, I slumped against the wall, a sense of isolation wrapping around me. The police would come, questions would be asked, and accusations made. But deep down I knew that no matter what happened next, things would never be the same again. In that moment, I realized the bitter truth. I was living with a man who might choose his mother over his wife, and the thought chilled me to the bone. The days that followed were a blur of cold silences and unspoken accusations. Clara, Marcus's mother, was oblivious to the storm brewing in our home, or so it seemed. Her visits, once merely annoying, now felt like a deliberate invasion. On a Friday evening, Clara arrived with her usual pomp. "Evelyn, darling, I brought your favorite, lemon pound cake," she announced, placing the cake on the kitchen counter as if she owned the place. I forced a smile, my grip tightening on the kitchen towel. "Thank you, Clara. That's thoughtful." Clara waltzed around the kitchen, humming a tune, while I struggled to keep my composure. She opened cabinets, rearranged my spices, her every action setting my nerves on edge. Marcus, as usual, was no help. "Mom's just trying to be nice, Evie. Don't be so uptight," he whispered, his hand on my shoulder. I shrugged off his touch, my frustration boiling over. "Nice? Marcus, she's treating our home like it's her personal playground." Before he could respond, Clara called out, "Evelyn, darling, why don't you set the table? I'll finish up here." Set the table? In my own home? I felt like a guest, and a barely tolerated one at that. Dinner was an excruciating affair. Clara dominated the conversation, her every word dripping with condescension. "Evelyn, you really should try this new facial cream I found. It does wonders for those pesky wrinkles." I bit my tongue, my anger simmering. Marcus just smiled, oblivious to the barbs hidden in his mother's words. The final straw came when Clara started discussing our personal finances, a topic I had always considered private. "Marcus, dear, you really should invest in real estate. Evelyn's little job is cute, but you need something more substantial for the future." I couldn't take it anymore. "Clara, with all due respect, our finances are none of your concern." The room fell silent. Clara's eyes narrowed, a glint of malice in them. "Oh, I see. Well, I'm just trying to look out for my son. After all, we can't all come from money, can we?" Her words stung, a reminder of the modest background I came from. I felt Marcus's hand on mine, a silent plea for peace. But peace was the last thing on my mind. As Clara continued to prattle on, oblivious to the hurt she had caused, a plan began to form in my mind. If Marcus wouldn't stand up to his mother, then I would. Clara needed to learn that she couldn't just walk over people, and I was going to be the one to teach her. After dinner, I excused myself, claiming a headache. Alone in our bedroom, I allowed the tears to flow. Marcus's mother was ruining our marriage, and he was letting her. But I wasn't going to be a victim any longer. Clara had taken my watch, my peace, and my dignity. It was time for her to pay. My mind raced with ideas, each more satisfying than the last. Revenge, they say, is a dish best served cold, and I was ready to serve it up in spades. Clara had no idea what she had unleashed. But she would. Oh, she definitely would. The following week was a slow burn of anticipation. Each day, I plotted my revenge against Clara, fantasizing about the moment I would put her in her place. But nothing prepared me for the audacity of her next move. It was a Saturday morning. Clara had arrived unannounced, as was her habit now. Marcus had stepped out to run errands, leaving me alone with her. The tension in the air was palpable. I was in the living room, trying to read, when Clara sauntered in, a smug smile on her face, and there it was on her wrist, my watch. My heart pounded in my chest, a mix of rage and disbelief. "That's my watch," I said, my voice low and dangerous. Clara glanced at the watch nonchalantly. "Oh, this old thing, I found it lying around. Thought it might suit me." I stood up, my hands shaking. "You had no right to take it. It's mine." Clara laughed, a cold, harsh sound. "Finders keepers, dear. Besides, it looks better on me." The nerve of her. I felt a scream building inside me, but I swallowed it down. This wasn't just about the watch anymore. This was about respect, about boundaries. "You need to give it back. Now," I demanded, my voice steely. Clara waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, don't be such a drama queen, Evelyn. It's just a watch." Just a watch? It was the last gift from my father, a symbol of his love and sacrifice. And she treated it like a trinket. I took a deep breath, trying to control the tempest inside me. "You don't understand. That watch means a lot to me. You have no idea." But Clara just smirked. "Well, now it means a lot to me, too, so I guess I'll be keeping it." I couldn't believe her audacity. It was clear she had no intention of returning it. My mind raced with anger and hurt. This was a declaration of war. "Fine, keep it. But remember, Clara, every action has consequences," I said, my voice icy. Clara laughed again, clearly amused by my threat. "Oh, Evelyn, always so dramatic. Don't worry, I'll take good care of your precious watch." As she sauntered out of the room, I felt a resolve solidify within me. Clara had crossed a line, and I was no longer going to play the passive victim. Marcus returned home later, and I confronted him. "Your mother took my watch. She's wearing it like it's hers." Marcus sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Mom can be a bit eccentric. I'm sure she didn't mean any harm." Eccentric? This was outright theft. I could barely contain my fury. "Marcus, this isn't about being eccentric. She stole from me, from us, and you're just going to let her get away with it?" He avoided my gaze, a sure sign of his discomfort. "I'll talk to her, Evie. I promise." Talk to her? That was it? I realized then that Marcus would never stand up to his mother. It was always going to be me against her. But I was ready. Clara had made a powerful enemy in me, and I was going to make sure she regretted ever crossing me. I lay in bed that night, unable to sleep, my mind churning with plans of revenge. Clara had underestimated me, and she was going to pay for it. I was going to get my watch back, and I was going to make her suffer for ever thinking she could take it from me. The battle lines were drawn, and I was ready to fight. Clara had no idea what was coming for her, but she would learn. They all would. The days leading up to my plan were filled with a simmering rage. Clara's audacity to take my watch and flaunt it was unbearable. But what I discovered next pushed me over the edge. It was a Thursday evening, and Marcus was late from work. I decided to do some cleaning to distract myself. As I was tidying up the guest room, I stumbled upon something that made my blood run cold. Clara's belongings, neatly tucked away in the closet. Fury and betrayal swirled within me. I confronted Marcus as soon as he walked through the door. "Why are Clara's things in our guest room?" I demanded, barely containing my anger. Marcus's face paled. She's been staying here while we're at work. She said it was to help out around the house. Staying here? Without my knowledge? I felt like I was in a nightmare. And you agreed to this? Behind my back? I was shaking with rage. Marcus tried to placate me. She's just trying to be helpful, Evie. I didn't think it would be a big deal. Not a big deal? His mother, the woman who had stolen from me, was invading our home, and he thought it wasn't a big deal? This is our home, Marcus. Your mother has no right to be here without my consent. Marcus sighed, looking exhausted. I'll talk to her, Evie. I'll sort it out. But his promises were empty. I knew then that I had to take matters into my own hands. The next day I waited for Clara to arrive. The doorbell rang, and I opened it to find her standing there, the stolen watch glittering on her wrist. Evelyn, dear, I brought some groceries, she said, breezing past me. I closed the door and faced her, my resolve steeling. Clara, we need to talk. She looked at me, a smirk playing on her lips. About what, dear? About the watch, about you staying here without my knowledge. This ends now. Clara laughed, a sound that grated on my nerves. Oh, Evelyn, you're being ridiculous. I'm just helping out my son. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my composure. You're not helping, Clara. You're overstepping and you're stealing. I want my watch back, and I want you out of this house. Clara's expression hardened. I'm not going anywhere, Evelyn, and the watch is mine now. Get used to it. Her blatant disrespect and arrogance fueled my anger. This is not the end of this, Clara. I will get my watch back, and I will make sure you regret ever crossing me. Clara scoffed. Threats, Evelyn, really? You're no match for me. But she was wrong. I was more than a match for her, and I was going to prove it. As she went about her day, invading my space and my life, I put my plan into action. I contacted a lawyer, ready to fight for my rights, for my dignity. Clara had underestimated me, but she was about to find out just how determined I was. The battle lines were drawn. Clara had made a grave mistake, and she would soon realize just how costly it was. I lay in bed that night, my mind racing with plans and strategies. I would not rest until I had reclaimed what was mine and put Clara in her place. She had awoken a fire in me, and I was ready to burn everything down if I had to. The war was on, and I was ready to fight to the bitter end. Clara had no idea what she had unleashed, but she would. She would learn that some lines should never be crossed. The day of reckoning arrived sooner than I expected. It was a crisp Saturday morning when I set my plan into motion. I waited for Clara to leave the house for her usual shopping, the watch conspicuously flashing on her wrist. The moment the door closed behind her, I made my move. I called the police, my voice steady but filled with righteous anger. I'd like to report a theft. The thief is my mother-in-law, Clara. She's stolen a very expensive watch from me, and I have proof. The operator's calm voice was a stark contrast to the storm raging within me. We'll send an officer over to take your statement, ma'am. Please ensure the item is indeed missing and prepare any evidence you have. I hung up, my heart pounding in anticipation. Today, Clara's reign of terror would end. I didn't have to wait long. The police arrived just as Clara was returning, her arms laden with shopping bags. The look on her face when she saw the police car was worth everything I had endured. What's going on, Evelyn? Why are the police here? Clara's voice trembled, a crack in her usually composed demeanor. I've reported the theft of my watch, the one you're wearing, I said, my voice cold. Clara's face drained of color. You can't be serious. This is just a family matter. The police officers stepped in, their presence authoritative. Ma'am, we need to ask you some questions about the watch you're wearing. Clara's composure crumbled as she realized the gravity of the situation. This is just a misunderstanding. Evelyn gave me this watch. I stood firm, my resolve unshaken. That's a lie. That watch was stolen from me and I want it back. The officers took statements from both of us. Clara's lies twisted and turned, but the truth was clear as day. The evidence was on her wrist. Finally, with a heavy heart, the police took Clara into custody. As she was led away, her eyes met mine, filled with betrayal and fear. But I felt no sympathy. She had brought this upon herself. Marcus arrived in the midst of the chaos, his face a mask of confusion and concern. Evelyn, what's happening? Why is my mother being arrested? I looked at him, the man I had loved, now a stranger to me. She stole my watch, Marcus, and you did nothing, so I did what I had to. He looked lost, torn between his wife and his mother. But Evelyn, she's my mother. Couldn't we have handled this privately? Privately? After everything Clara had done? No, Marcus. This isn't just about a watch. It's about respect, boundaries, and truth. Something your mother knows nothing about. As the police car drove away, I felt a sense of closure. The watch was returned to me, a little worse for wear, but still precious. Marcus tried to talk to me, to explain, to apologize. But his words fell on deaf ears. Clara's arrest had exposed the deep cracks in our marriage, cracks that perhaps had always been there. I retreated into the house, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. I had stood up for myself against Clara, but now I faced a new challenge, deciding the fate of my marriage. As I sat alone, the house eerily quiet, I realized that this was just the beginning. Clara's downfall was my victory, but it was also a stark reminder of the choices I had to make. I had fought for my dignity and won. Now it was time to fight for my future. The fallout from Clara's arrest was immediate and tumultuous. The news spread like wildfire, igniting whispers and stares in our community. But the hardest part was facing Marcus, who seemed a shadow of the man I married. A few days later, Marcus came to me, his eyes weary and voice heavy. "Evelyn, Mom's in trouble. She's facing serious charges, and her savings, they're gone. She's talking about selling her house." I listened, a mix of vindication and sadness swirling inside me. "Marcus, she brought this on herself. She stole from me, from us. There are consequences to actions. But she's my mother, Evelyn. I can't just abandon her," he pleaded, his loyalty torn. I sighed, my heart aching. "I understand she's your mother, Marcus, but where was your loyalty when I needed you, when she was invading our home, our life?" He had no answer, his silence speaking volumes. The next few weeks were a blur of legal proceedings and strained silence at home. Clara's once proud demeanor crumbled under the weight of her actions. She was found guilty and faced not only legal repercussions but also public shame. Marcus, caught in the crossfire, suffered at work. His performance declined, and soon rumors of his mother's actions reached his workplace. He resigned, unable to bear the humiliation and stress. One evening, as we sat in our living room, the distance between us like a chasm, Marcus spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "Evelyn, I think Mom and we're going to move. Start over somewhere else." I looked at him, the man I had once loved so deeply. "And what about us, Marcus?" He looked at me, pain etched on his face. "I don't know, Evelyn. I don't know if there's an us anymore." The words hung in the air, a painful truth we both had avoided. As Marcus and Clara's world unraveled, I felt a bitter satisfaction. Clara had paid the price for her arrogance and deceit. But the cost was high, too high. The day Marcus left, the house felt empty, a shell of the home we had built together. I watched as he drove away, Clara in the passenger seat, both defeated and broken. I sat alone, the silence deafening. My revenge had been successful, but it left me hollow. I had stood up for myself, but at what cost? I thought about the watch, now safely tucked away in my drawer. It was more than just a timepiece. It was a reminder of my strength, my resilience, but it was also a reminder of the price of revenge. The sweet satisfaction was fleeting, replaced by a lingering sadness. I had won the battle, but the war had taken its toll. As I sat in the quiet of my home, I realized that this was not the end, but a new beginning. I had to rebuild, to find myself again. The watch, my father's gift, was a symbol of that journey, a journey to rediscover who I was, beyond the scars of betrayal and revenge. The path ahead was uncertain, but I was ready to face it. With or without Marcus, I would move forward, stronger and wiser. Karma had struck, and its lessons were harsh but clear. It was time to leave the past behind and embrace a new future. One step at a time. In the weeks following Marcus's departure, I found myself in a state of reflection. The house, once filled with the noise of our life together, now echoed with silence. It was in this silence that I began to confront the reality of what had transpired. My revenge against Clara had been successful, but it had come at a great cost. I had lost my husband, and in many ways, a part of myself. But amidst the ruins, I found a sense of empowerment. I had stood up for myself, something I realized I had been afraid to do for too long. One evening, as I sat looking at the watch, a symbol of my victory and loss, my phone rang. It was Marcus. His voice was different, tinged with regret and sadness. "Evelyn, I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. For everything. I should have stood by you. I let you down." I listened, a myriad of emotions swirling within me. Thank you, Marcus. That means a lot, but I think it's too late for us now. There was a pause, heavy with unspoken words. I know, he finally said. I just hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me someday. I sighed, a weight lifting off my shoulders. I already have, Marcus, but forgiving doesn't mean forgetting. We both need to move on. After the call, I felt a sense of closure. The chapter of my life with Marcus and Clara was over, but a new one was waiting to be written. In the months that followed, I focused on myself. I reconnected with old friends, took up hobbies I had long neglected, and started to rebuild my life, piece by piece. Clara, on the other hand, faced her own demons. The legal consequences of her actions had left her financially and emotionally drained. The once proud and imposing figure was now a shadow of her former self. Through mutual acquaintances, I heard of her struggles, but I felt no joy in her downfall. It was a sad end to a sad story. As for Marcus, he tried to rebuild his relationship with his mother, but the damage was done. Their bond, once unbreakable, was now fragile and strained. He moved to a different city, starting over in a bid to escape the shadows of the past. And as for me, I learned to find joy in the little things. The watch, once a symbol of conflict, became a reminder of my strength and resilience. It was a testament to my ability to overcome adversity, to stand up for what was right. I realized that life was too short to be spent in anger and revenge. The experiences had taught me the value of forgiveness, not for the sake of others, but for my own peace. As I moved forward, I carried with me the lessons of the past. I had faced betrayal and come out stronger. I had learned the hard way that sometimes the best revenge is to let go and live well. The watch ticked on, marking not just the passage of time, but the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter where I was the author, writing a story of hope, healing, and new beginnings. In the end, I knew that the greatest revenge was in living a life full of happiness, a life that was mine and mine alone. And with that realization, I stepped into a future filled with endless possibilities, the watch on my wrist a constant companion on this journey.
I warned you to avoid causing trouble. Quit interfering with others' time by performing pointless things. Why don't you start performing your duties in the sales department correctly before you go lecturing people from other departments? We find it obnoxious when you pretend like you're the new guy all the time. I refrained from expressing my feelings to my supervisor, who appeared clearly irritated. And then, what do you know? I have no problem terminating you. As if it were a smart idea, she said, "It doesn't matter whether you're here or not." I thought I was at my breaking point. Andrew is my name. I worked at a food processing company after I graduated from college. When my father became ill, I went back to my hometown. Fortunately, he is no longer in the hospital. But following his health problem, my dad was uncomfortable leaving my mom alone herself at home. "Andrew, would you consider coming back here?" He asked me during a visit while he was in the hospital. I therefore quit my work and accepted a position at a nearby baby supply store. Although it was difficult to find a solid position for a mid-career hiring, I would have chosen a job that utilized my prior work expertise. I therefore accepted a position with this growing company. However, there were undoubtedly difficulties involved with switching to a different industry. How many times is this, Andrew? The third time. I guess it's the fifth. When are you going to remember? The section manager is the woman who is showing me the documents, her expression displaying complete disbelief. At your prior job, you used computers, right? Why are you unable to recall? Simply put, the formats are different. No justifications. Go ahead and do it. This file is located right here. She yelled, "Yes, I have more important things to do than watch you." She kept helping, but I felt sad for her because I was having trouble with unfamiliar paperwork. I worked in the quality control department on site at my prior employment, so I rarely had to create paperwork and didn't handle many of them. To be honest, I'm clueless when they ask me to prepare a document, even though my college qualification helped me gain a job in sales administration at my current employer. It was suddenly catching up to me after I had been cruising by on templates alone. Man, maybe sales just isn't for me. It let me understand how ideal my previous position was for me. In addition, I had a girlfriend at the time. At the same company, she worked diligently at the office and frequently took over for me. However, I ended up ending our relationship because I lacked the confidence to ask her, a city girl, to come to the country with me. I miss the lunches she used to pack for me, especially since I'm a bit picky with food. All the women I've dated before didn't like cooking for me, but she always struggled and made meals for me. I didn't want to inconvenience her, a woman who wholeheartedly devoted herself to me. Despite being the one to end things, I still have feelings for her. I returned to my hometown after we split up, but things haven't been great. I contemplate quitting my job almost daily, but since I haven't been at this company for long, it might impact my job hunting prospects. So, for now, I'm just observing how things go. It's pretty much an escape from reality. While I'm discontented with my current situation and anxious about the future, I can't take the next step forward. One day, someone from the planning department brought up a collaboration project with a major food company. Our company is fairly large in the baby product business, and our mascot character is quite popular among customers. While we do well with apparel and toys, our own food brand wasn't selling too well. They wanted to put more focus on the food division, and this idea came up to stimulate interest and generate buzz. From the looks of my colleagues, it seemed the other company wasn't too enthusiastic about the collaboration. After many meetings, we finally found a company willing to partner with us. A meeting was scheduled at our office with their sales representative and our manager. This is a busy day, so don't cause any problems. No unnecessary questions either. My manager warned me in the morning. After finishing some tasks, I headed to the vending machines. On my way, I bumped into a representative from the other company coming out of the conference room. "You're Andrew, right? Don't you remember? We worked together before." "Oh, Tony. Jess, I didn't expect to see you here. Did you leave your previous job? Are you now at the food division here?" He bombarded me with questions. "No, I'm currently in sales," I replied. "Oh," Tony mumbled almost to himself. "That explains it. That explains it. What's that supposed to mean?" I was about to ask him when my cell phone rang. It was a call from my manager. Sorry. Please, go on without minding me." "I'll visit again," said Tony, and he left while my phone continued to ring. I answered it. The first thing I heard was, "You're late. Where are you?" "At the vending." "Come back right now," my manager said, abruptly ending the call. I returned to my department to see a flurry of activity. One of my colleagues who had been in a meeting told me, the sample we presented as a product image wasn't well received by the client. We need a new one by the week after next. Our department and planning are all hands on deck for overtime. You're free, right? The manager added, "Let Andrew handle the menial tasks." She handed me some documents to copy and went back to her tasks. Menial tasks, huh? Looking around, while the feedback seemed negative, everyone had a determined spirit, thinking we still had a chance next time. I felt isolated from the group. I may be a burden, but I want to help in some way. That's what I thought, so I pulled out a notebook where I'd written some half-finished notes and decided to continue writing in it. It was a small thing, but consistency appeared to be key. By reviewing repeatedly, I reduced my mistakes. When I finally had some free time, Mike from the planning department gave me some leftover baby food samples. "I'm confident about this one," he said, and I eagerly tasted the carrot puree. Instantly, I blurted out, "This is awful." Unintentionally, I continued, "Well, it's baby food. It's not supposed to taste that great to adults," someone chuckled. "No, this is really not good. It's bitter, and although I can taste the carrot, the broth flavor is overpowering. It's not that different from homemade, so why would parents buy this to feed their kids?" I pointed out. While I was just trying to be honest, it seemed that I had overstepped. given I wasn't directly involved in the project. But Andrew, you worked in a food company before, right? You've never dealt with baby food, though. Not sure your input is really needed here, they retorted. I was about to respond when my manager, who seemed to have overheard the conversation, stopped me. She later told me, "I thought I asked you not to cause any trouble. Maybe you don't get it since you joined mid-career, but this is a crucial time for the company. Stop meddling and disrupting everyone's flow. Before you go lecturing people from other departments, do your job in sales properly. It's problematic if you keep acting like a newbie. Honestly, I wouldn't mind if you were let go. It wouldn't make a difference with or without you." Frustrated by her blatant statement, I felt I had reached my limit. "Understood. It was a short time, but thank you," I replied, bowing to my manager and going back to my desk to finish up. Even though my contribution might not have seemed significant, the notebook I had been diligently jotting work procedures in felt pointless now. I ripped it up and left the company. On my way home, I called someone. "Hey, it's me." A few days after being fired, I received a call from my manager on my cell phone. What does she want now? I thought, feeling annoyed. I considered ignoring it, but the person I was with encouraged me to answer. Hello, Andrew. Can you talk right now?" My manager's voice lacked its usual energy. Assuming we wouldn't have much to chat about, I replied, "Sure, go ahead, thanks. I'm sorry for what I said the other day. We didn't know you well enough, and both Mike and I shouldn't have said those things. We were just in a meeting with a client and the planning team. They had apparently presented the carrot paste I had severely criticized as a sample in the meeting. Then Tony said something very similar to what I had mentioned. Do you genuinely think this tastes good? It has a strong bitter taste, and the broth flavor overpowers the carrot. No matter how good the ingredients are, you can't expect repeat customers. This is a joint business app after all. We need you to think of a product that will sell more. And there's a guy named Andrew in sales you should consider involving. He used to work for our rival company and was in their quality control department. He's what's called a super taster, someone with more taste buds than average. He's not only gifted in taste, but can also accurately recall and compare flavors. I strongly suggest involving him in this project. They decided to continue the meeting next time with me in attendance. Apparently, it wasn't the right mood to say, "Andrew was just fired a few days ago." My manager continued, Please come back. Without you, they won't agree to the main contract. You know our sales projection for this project, right? Food and merchandise combined, it's $5 million. The CEO even said if this project fails, we withdraw from baby food production. So please." Ignoring her plea, I responded, "I told you it's none of my business anymore since I've been fired. I wanted to thank you, manager, for giving me the chance to step away from such a narrow-minded workplace where we couldn't even exchange opinions between departments. Thanks to you, I've come to terms with my feelings. Good luck with the project." I hung up while she was still talking on the other end. "Is everything okay now?" Megan asked while driving. The day I was fired, on an impulse, I had called my ex-girlfriend, Megan. I had reached my limit and just wanted to hear her voice in that moment. The word patience did not exist in my vocabulary. Andrew, hearing Megan's voice for the first time in months, I felt deflated. "Megan, I'm going to ask you something really selfish. Please, let's get back together." After a long silence, she responded, "If you let me slap you twice, counting the one from when we broke up, then sure." Thanks to that, my face was swollen today. Looking at my reflection in the car mirror, I asked, "Do you think it's okay to greet people with this face?" Just as the car stopped at a red light, she said, "Considering it's our old place, you look so handsome that they might even feel sympathetic. It's just perfect." Megan, pouting like a child, has always been my savior, forgiving me no matter how much I hurt her. Apparently, word got out that Andrew was fired. Megan had told my previous company, and the HR manager contacted me right away, asking, "Would you like to come back?" My replacement hadn't been decided yet, and the remaining team was struggling, torn between decisions. My mother said, "It's nice to know your dad and you are happy, but it's important to do what you love. I hope you do what you won't regret." With her words, I decided to rejoin. Still, I feel uneasy about living away from my parents, so I think I'll consult with them when buying a house. I need to earn a lot for that. Welcome back. Isn't it too soon? My colleague Ken joked, but I, donning my pristine work uniform, felt it fit perfectly and replied, "No, I think I realized it too late." That previous project did end up getting canceled, and the company withdrew from baby food production. Meanwhile, my company ventured into baby food production. I attended the product development meetings as a representative of the quality control department. The environment in which opinions can be exchanged regardless of faction is a meaningful one. The products that have been launched have been well received by consumers and are selling well, and there is already talk of increasing the variety of flavors and forms to suit different uses, such as travel-sized products. Watching children enjoy the food, I feel fulfilled. There are many foods I don't like, but I want everyone to taste something even I find delicious. Just realizing this made those few months' experiences invaluable to me. Useless people have no place here. The text message that was delivered to my phone stated that I had been unexpectedly allocated just prior to the presentation. It's obvious that Travis, the department manager who emailed this, has no regard for the business. Most likely, his only goal is to disparage those he doesn't like. Travis is taking advantage of this chance to humiliate and destroy me because he despises me. But I can't afford to make a mistake here and hurt the business. With determination, I collect myself and begin presenting the product using the proper terminology. I'm lucky enough to succeed, but I can't give in to Travis's demands. I had already started a particular plan. Those things I trusted to a few people would be useful soon enough. I silently continued to record information for my eventual revenge, thinking of that moment. I'm Matthew, and this year was my 33rd birthday. My favorite things are productive work and cordial connections with my coworkers. Since I was in school, I have always engaged with a lot of people because I value relationships. Speaking with individuals from various backgrounds taught me a variety of viewpoints and thought processes that have been very beneficial in my current position. I have frequently been curiously asked by close coworkers, "Matthew, why do you work so hard? Everyone else departs on schedule." I always respond to that by saying, "Well, it's a waste of time and stressful to pretend to be someone I'm not. It's far more enjoyable to do what I want to do." Since I was young and ignorant of the outside world at the time, I believe I could have said anything along such lines. I didn't realize that a lot of people had situations that keep them from expressing their desires. Nevertheless, I have no regrets for speaking those remarks because I met a lot of people who shared my views. I understand, Matthew. That's quite commendable. Perhaps I'll look for people who are motivated to put in more effort as well. It probably wouldn't go as planned if I said something like that now, as an adult. Things worked out well because we were young and surrounded by sympathetic individuals at the time. Matthew, I found so many people who share the same value, 5 people. That is incredible. Okay, so going forward, we will work as a team with a common goal. We discussed our values from that day on. We shared fresh ideas and taught others effective work practices, regardless of our departments or roles. Those accumulating recollections form the fundamental basis of my current identity. I currently work for a large corporation that has offices all over the world. It's a corporation that many people admire and has achieved some of the best results in the industry. People always find me surprising when I tell them I work there. But recently, I've had a bit of a problem with a particular newcomer who keeps calling me incompetent. Even small mistakes lead to long lectures, and it's been bothering me. June brought the rainy season. The gloomy weather that had lingered for so long suddenly gave way to a clear, brilliant sky stretching above us. As I stared at the bright sky and headed to work, I stepped into the sales office, only to hear Travis's shouting voice. I sighed, thinking, here we go again. Why can't you get something this simple done quickly? Everyone else manages just fine. You're unbelievably slow. That's Travis, the department manager, berating one of the colleagues. Travis is a man in his 30s who recently transferred to the sales department. Wearing an expensive suit, a luxury wristwatch, and a gleaming wedding ring, he looks like the epitome of success. His desk reflects the same image, cluttered with high-end stationery and the latest tablet devices. Even the small ornaments tucked into the corner are flashy, covered in golden embellishments that feel out of place in the office. Travis lashes out at his subordinates over the smallest annoyances. Most of all, his insults are especially sharp when results don't meet his expectations. I promised Mr. Stevens I would do a proper job as department manager. If my subordinates are incompetent, they'll just drag me down. Useless people aren't needed here. Get back to work. The colleague being scolded apologized, saying, "I'm very sorry," before quickly returning to his desk. Oh, young people like that shouldn't even bother joining this company. They'd have been better off somewhere else. Still fuming, Travis turned his attention to me as well. Hey you, useless employee. Stop standing around and get back to work. Time is limited, you know. Yes, sir, I replied. Not wanting to endure yet another long lecture, I quietly returned to my desk. Watching the exhausted colleague, I couldn't just sit there and do nothing. I walked up to the colleague and tapped them on the shoulder. Rough day, huh? This isn't much, but have it during your break. I handed him an energy bar I had stashed in my pocket and returned to my seat. It's not something to brag about, but I know most of my colleagues' preferences pretty well. After working here for over 10 years, it's only natural. That's why I always carry small snacks in my pocket to help out my colleagues in times of need. This might help for now, but it's still just a temporary fix. There are several other colleagues who've also been pushed to the edge by Travis's constant berating. This situation needs to be resolved sooner rather than later. While I was thinking about that, I didn't even notice that Travis was watching me. A notification buzzed on my phone as I continued my work. It was a text from Mr. Stevens. Puzzled, I began reading the message. Later that day, after speaking with Mr. Stevens and the useless people have no place here. The text message that was delivered to my phone stated that I had been unexpectedly allocated just prior to the presentation. It's obvious that Travis, the department manager who emailed this, has no regard for the business. Most likely, his only goal is to disparage those he doesn't like. Travis is taking advantage of this chance to humiliate and destroy me because he despises me. But I can't afford to make a mistake here and hurt the business. With determination, I collect myself and begin presenting the product using the proper terminology. I'm lucky enough to succeed, but I can't give in to Travis's demands. I had already started a particular plan. Those things I trusted to a few people would be useful soon enough. I silently continued to record information for my eventual revenge, thinking of that moment. I'm Matthew, and this year was my 33rd birthday. My favorite things are productive work and cordial connections with my coworkers. Since I was in school, I have always engaged with a lot of people because I value relationships. Speaking with individuals from various backgrounds taught me a variety of viewpoints and thought processes that have been very beneficial in my current position. I have frequently been curiously asked by close coworkers, Matthew, why do you work so hard? Everyone else departs on schedule. I always respond to that by saying, well, it's a waste of time and stressful to pretend to be someone I'm not. It's far more enjoyable to do what I want to do. Since I was young and ignorant of the outside world at the time, I believe I could have said anything along such lines. I didn't realize that a lot of people had situations that keep them from expressing their desires. Nevertheless, I have no regrets for speaking those remarks because I met a lot of people who shared my views. I understand, Matthew. That's quite commendable. Perhaps I'll look for people who are motivated to put in more effort as well. It probably wouldn't go as planned if I said something like that now, as an adult. Things worked out well because we were young and surrounded by sympathetic individuals at the time. Matthew, I found so many people who share the same value, 5 people. That is incredible. Okay, so going forward, we will work as a team with a common goal. We discussed our values from that day on. We shared fresh ideas and taught others effective work practices, regardless of our departments or roles. Those accumulating recollections form the fundamental basis of my current identity. I currently work for a large corporation that has offices all over the world. It's a corporation that many people admire and has achieved some of the best results in the industry. People always find me surprising when I tell them I work there. But recently, I've had a bit of a problem with a particular newcomer who keeps calling me incompetent. Even small mistakes lead to long lectures, and it's been bothering me. June brought the rainy season. The gloomy weather that had lingered for so long suddenly gave way to a clear, brilliant sky stretching above us. As I stared at the bright sky and headed to work, I stepped into the sales office, only to hear Travis's shouting voice. I sighed, thinking, here we go again. Why can't you get something this simple done quickly? Everyone else manages just fine. You're unbelievably slow. That's Travis, the department manager, berating one of the colleagues. Travis is a man in his 30s who recently transferred to the sales department. Wearing an expensive suit, a luxury wristwatch, and a gleaming wedding ring, he looks like the epitome of success. His desk reflects the same image, cluttered with high-end stationery and the latest tablet devices. Even the small ornaments tucked into the corner are flashy, covered in golden embellishments that feel out of place in the office. Travis lashes out at his subordinates over the smallest annoyances. Most of all, his insults are especially sharp when results don't meet his expectations. I promised Mr. Stevens I would do a proper job as department manager. If my subordinates are incompetent, they'll just drag me down. Useless people aren't needed here. Get back to work. The colleague being scolded apologized, saying, I'm very sorry, before quickly returning to his desk. Oh, young people like that shouldn't even bother joining this company. They'd have been better off somewhere else. Still fuming, Travis turned his attention to me as well. Hey you, useless employee. Stop standing around and get back to work. Time is limited, you know. Yes, sir, I replied. Not wanting to endure yet another long lecture, I quietly returned to my desk. Watching the exhausted colleague, I couldn't just sit there and do nothing. I walked up to the colleague and tapped them on the shoulder. Rough day, huh? This isn't much, but have it during your break. I handed him an energy bar I had stashed in my pocket and returned to my seat. It's not something to brag about, but I know most of my colleagues' preferences pretty well. After working here for over 10 years, it's only natural. That's why I always carry small snacks in my pocket, to help out my colleagues in times of need. This might help for now, but it's still just a temporary fix. There are several other colleagues who've also been pushed to the edge by Travis's constant berating. This situation needs to be resolved sooner rather than later. While I was thinking about that, I didn't even notice that Travis was watching me. A notification buzzed on my phone as I continued my work. It was a text from Mr. Stevens. Puzzled, I began reading the message. Later that day, after speaking with Mr. Stevens in the conference room, I decided to carry a small recording device in the pocket of my suit jacket. A few days later, I discreetly kept a recorder in my chest pocket while working in another department's office. The place where I currently work is the Overseas Business Department. Several team members had gone on maternity leave around the same time, leaving the department severely understaffed. Because it wasn't a great time to hire new colleagues, they decided to bring in experienced help from other departments. Me in this case. I've helped out here a few times before, so I knew I could be of some use. Glad to have you on board. I trust you more than others, Matthew, and you're already somewhat familiar with how things work here, said Tiffany, a woman in her 30s who welcomed me warmly. Understood. I'll be in your care for a while, I replied. Because I'd helped this team before, their reaction to me joining was fairly calm. Blending in naturally, I dove into my tasks, working hard to fill in where help was most needed. But that wasn't the only reason I was here. Actually, I'd been secretly assigned a mission by Mr. Stevens to investigate Travis's problematic behavior. I must have angered Travis somehow. When I was informed of my transfer to the Overseas Business Division, he had looked at me with a smug grin. Before moving, he'd also dumped far more grunt work on me than usual. I'm certain it wasn't just my imagination. As I sorted through documents, half occupied with these thoughts, another colleague spoke up. Are you doing okay, Matthew? If you need anything, please don't hesitate to ask. I'm fine, really. With things as hectic as they are, any help you can give us is a huge relief. Thank you. I'll make sure to reach out if I need anything. I had only stopped working because I was lost in thought, but I still felt a little embarrassed. I needed to focus and get back to work to avoid becoming a burden to others. Almost as if she had read my mind, Tiffany spoke up. You were just deep in thought, weren't you? How are you doing? Managing okay? Yeah, I'm fine. Thanks to your support, I'm getting by. I really appreciate it. Tiffany is a colleague my age, also in her 30s. We joined the company at the same time and have been working together as peers ever since. We understand each other well, but maintain an appropriate level of professionalism at work. Since our early days as new colleagues, we've seen a lot together, both at work and outside it. After years of sharing struggles and successes, we've come to understand each other's personalities and working styles deeply. Unfortunately, we're now in different departments. But after more than a decade at the same company, we both have a good sense of how each other's teams operate. Of course, only within the limits that do not violate confidentiality. If there's something you're unsure of, talk to Melissa or Kevin. Okay. If you need help organizing documents, Samuel is your guy. And if it's technical jargon, George knows it inside out. Perfect. Sounds like you know exactly who to go to. Tiffany clapped her hands with an amused smile on her face. You're in a good mood today. What's up? Well, remember that overseas company I've been reaching out to for ages? It looks like they're finally interested in our products. They want us to give them a presentation soon. Our company had long been trying to negotiate with a major American corporation, but talks had never quite materialized. Recently, though, it seemed like they were beginning to consider the deal, so the Overseas Business Division was abuzz with excitement. I don't know the details, but good luck. Of course, if I need any help, I'll let you know, so be ready. I don't think there will ever be a situation where we'd need just an extra hand. I looked at Tiffany, amused yet fond, as she enthusiastically got ready. Tiffany has always been a forward thinker, unafraid to take on challenges and push boundaries. She's never concerned about department lines and frequently proposes ideas to benefit the company as a whole. Lately, she's been advocating for developing new products aimed at overseas markets. Unlike Travis, Tiffany never looks down on people because of their age or experience. Honestly, I've often wished Travis could learn a thing or two from her. With that thought, I refocused on my work. Putting my skills to use by organizing English language materials, I returned completed files to their shelves. Ideally, everyone would put files back properly after using them. But when things get busy or when someone's distracted, mistakes happen. It's a task that needs regular attention, and for someone like me, stepping in as a temporary helper, it's the perfect job. As I concentrated, Travis suddenly entered the Overseas Business Division office. He approached Michael, the department head. I came to check on my colleague. Mind if I walk around a bit? No. Go right ahead, Michael replied. Even though Michael was older, He didn't seem to be able to stand up to Travis. I promised Mr. Stevens I'd do a proper job as department manager. If my subordinates are useless, they'll just drag me down, Travis muttered. I don't know whose words were murmured in that moment. For me, it wasn't the speaker, but what was said that caught my attention. The moment Travis showed up, murmurs of dissatisfaction started to ripple through the office. I couldn't help but overhear snippets of their comments as I worked, mentally taking notes. It's unfair. He became manager through connections, not skill. Now he's wasting time walking around other departments. I heard Michael can't stand up to him because Travis has something on him. I feel bad for anyone stuck working under that guy. I'd always felt there was something off about Travis. His rise to the position of department manager at such a young age had struck me as odd. These murmurs only confirmed my suspicions. While I mulled over these thoughts, I turned and realized, to my surprise, that Travis had gotten much closer to me than I'd expected. Grinning smugly, he walked right up to where I was sitting. Looks like you're fitting in here nicely. Sending you here as a helper was the right call, after all. Ah, is that so? I struggled to find the right words, and my face must have looked tense with nerves. But Travis, of course, misinterpreted it entirely. You seem to be struggling, so I'll have you stay here for a while. Do your best, he said. He assumed my expression was because I couldn't keep up with the work here. Even without Travis asking, I intended to work hard because I didn't want to trouble my kind and supportive colleagues. Oh, by the way, everyone here graduated from top-tier universities. Since you're from a third-tier university, you must feel out of place. But don't even think about running away, he added. Hearing those words, I felt something unsettling. A third-tier university. Where did you hear that? I asked. The other day, I saw one of your colleagues drunk at a bar and got quite a bit out of them. I get it. Having a mediocre academic background might make someone want to hide their incompetence. But keeping track of this kind of information is part of a department head's job. Don't take it personally, he replied. It was likely the alcohol talking, loose lips, and muddled memories. I hadn't actually graduated from a third-tier university, but I figured it might cause trouble if I were called a liar or something. So I decided to keep my real background hidden. I might end up being labeled as incompetent while keeping my background hidden, but since I'm working in the overseas business department now, I'm fine with that. Satisfied with my silence, Travis smirked and left the room. After that, I was assigned a certain business negotiation by Michael. It was with the major American corporation Tiffany had mentioned. Honestly, as a temporary helper, this shouldn't have fallen on me. It had Travis's fingerprints all over it. He was leveraging something as important as a future-defining deal for personal reasons, throwing me into the fire. He doesn't seem like someone suited for the position of department head. The following weeks were grueling. With the weight of the company's future on my shoulders, I couldn't afford to mess up. The stress gnawed at my stomach each night. On my way home, I grabbed energy drinks from my favorite shop just to keep going. Thankfully, my colleagues rallied around me. Tiffany especially stayed late to help me prepare, and I couldn't be more grateful. Thanks. If you hadn't helped, this would have been so much worse, I told her. Helping a friend is just what you do, but you owe me a nice meal when this is over, okay, she replied. I know. I'll treat you to the best dinner you've ever had, I promised. Then came the day of the event. At last, the fateful day arrived. With all the necessary materials in hand, Tiffany and I headed to the client's office. After giving our names at reception, we were escorted to a meeting room. The moment we walked in, a foreign colleague greeted us in English, catching me by surprise. At that moment, I realized what Travis had been planning. A confused Tiffany leaned in and spoke to me in a low voice. Wait, do we have to handle this in English? Looks like it. Guess we got no choice but to face it head on, I replied. Face it. Wait, you can do this, right? she asked with a questioning look. I decided to show her through my actions. Seeing me begin to handle the situation in English, her eyes widened in surprise. The negotiation went surprisingly well. The atmosphere was positive and encouraging. It seemed the client had intended to partner with us from the very beginning. The discussion even extended to post-deal logistics and planning. As the meeting progressed, more Japanese colleagues began trickling into the room. Clearly, the deal's importance had drawn in leaders from various departments. At this point, the discussion had become too detailed for me to handle alone. I was about to explain the situation to the newly joined Japanese colleague and suggest that we call it a day. However, it seemed the situation wasn't that simple after all. "Excuse me, isn't there a product presentation scheduled in the main conference room right after this? We'll guide you there now unless you have another engagement," someone said. Tiffany and I instinctively exchanged glances, both of us saying, "Huh. Wait, I didn't hear anything about this. Is this some kind of mistake?" "No, it's probably Travis pulling the strings again. But since we got everything we need, it's better to handle this without making a scene," I replied. I had already committed to seeing this through, and an extra challenge wouldn't change that now. We headed to the main conference room for round 2. On the way, I received a text from Travis. The timing was so perfect, so pointed, that I couldn't help but grudgingly admire his pettiness. "Is it time for the presentation yet?" the text read. It continued with a stream of meaningless filler, but I skipped the end where it concluded, "Useless people have no place here." It was then I remembered he still believed that nonsense about my academic background. When we reached the main conference room, I stepped onto the stage that had been prepared. Taking a deep breath, I quickly organized the flow of the presentation in my mind, planning to deliver it in both Japanese and English to suit the multinational audience. "Thank you for taking the time to join us today," I said, first in Japanese, then immediately switched to fluent English. At first, I noticed some people tilting their heads in confusion at my words, and I couldn't help but nod in understanding. It seemed that everyone here had been told the product explanation would be given in English. As I continued speaking, referencing the materials and explaining the product in detail, I scanned the room. The audience appeared attentive, without any trace of hostility. Clearly, there was no one here trying to sabotage me. As I stood on stage, continuing my presentation, I noticed someone new entering the large conference room. It was Travis, who was supposed to be back at the company. Perhaps he had come to check whether his subordinates were handling the presentation properly. However, when he saw me explaining fluently, he looked visibly surprised. Before long, his face contorted with frustration, and he left the room without a word. After the presentation, Tiffany and I returned to the office. I gave my report to the Overseas Business Division and then stopped by the sales department. It felt oddly nostalgic after working in a different department for so long. As I looked around, I noticed something familiar sitting on my colleagues' desks, the small recording devices I had distributed earlier. Seeing them still there, untouched, reassured me that my plan was progressing smoothly. But Travis wasted no time. He stormed over to me with a scowl. "What the hell was that about?" "No one told me anything," he shouted. "What do you mean by that?" I asked. "Don't play dumb. You were speaking fluent English at the client's company, weren't you?" I had only asked to ensure there was no mistake, but it seemed he thought I was messing with him. Travis glared at me, slamming his desk forcefully with a loud bang. "I didn't know you could speak English that well. Were you lying to us this whole time? And on top of that, I heard you introduced yourself as a graduate from a top-tier university during the negotiation." I was shocked when I heard about it from one of the client's colleagues on the way back. I never intended to lie. I had made it clear during my self-introduction to Travis from the very beginning. The day Travis became manager, all the colleagues had introduced themselves. But clearly, he hadn't been paying attention. Travis glared at me, furious. With a sudden motion, he grabbed a pen from his desk and hurled it at me. I had anticipated the move and easily sidestepped it. Undeterred, Travis began throwing more items. His pencil case, a folder, even a crumpled piece of paper. Eventually, his desk was cleared except for one item, a recording device. Seeing it, he finally seemed to regain some composure. "Fine. Let's stay calm," he said, steadying his breathing. Changing his approach, he grabbed my hand firmly and said, "Well done. You really came through this time. I'm so proud of you." From the outside, it might look like a boss showing care for his subordinate. But no one knows the truth better than I do. Travis's mouth was twitching, and more than anything, the incredible force gripping my hand said it all. It felt like I was a small animal caught in a snake's coils. Still, I had no choice but to endure it. After holding the handshake for several seconds, Travis finally let go and snorted dismissively. "Don't get cocky. I'll make sure you're out of here one way or another," he growled, his voice venomous. After taking a deep breath to calm himself, Travis turned away. "Get back to your work. I don't want to waste any more time talking to you." Of course, I felt the same way. Since I had nothing to say to Travis, I quickly left the scene. A week had passed since then. Travis continued to subject me to small acts of harassment. Most were fairly trivial. He would nag me for no reason or send me out to buy lunch for him like I was some errand boy. Thankfully, he rarely came around when I was working with other departments, so I had some peace. One day, I was carrying several sheets of paper for colleagues who preferred sketching designs on paper rather than using a computer. Tiffany, always willing to help, grabbed half the load and struck up a conversation. "Now that you mention it, Travis used to pop by here all the time, but I haven't seen him around lately," she said. I thought back over the past couple of days before answering, "Yeah, you're right." I wasn't sure if Travis was finally reflecting on his actions or quietly plotting something else. The latter possibility left me uneasy. I had managed to pull off that negotiation and presentation successfully, but if I had failed, the entire company would have faced serious repercussions. Well, I can't say I miss him. "But hey, you're using a different recorder today, aren't you?" Tiffany asked, glancing at my chest pocket. I smiled faintly. "Sharp eye. The old one's been acting up, so I sent it in for repairs. This one's a replacement." "Ha. Still, why do you always carry a recorder around?" "Oh, well." I hesitated slightly. I couldn't exactly tell her I was using it to document Travis's behavior. It's for work. Sometimes ideas pop into my head, and it's easier to record them as voice memos. "Wow, that's very you, Matthew, always so dedicated to your job." Her compliment made me think of Travis again. Travis, being Mr. Stevens' relative, lived a life of luxury. He often replaced his belongings, clothes, gadgets, and accessories, on a whim, carelessly discarding what he no longer wanted. Every time I saw him do that, I couldn't help but feel saddened for the craftsmen and manufacturers who put their effort into making those items. It was clear he'd never once thought about the people behind the products he used. "Speaking of your recorder, I remember seeing you talking to Mr. Stevens about a month ago." "I could have sworn you two were discussing something about recorders," Tiffany said. "Oh, that. It was nothing. He was just asking for my opinion on a new product," I replied. Tiffany gave me a long, steady look before turning her gaze elsewhere. Well, if it's something you can't talk about, I won't press you." It seemed she'd had seen right through me. It wouldn't be long before I could tell her the truth, but lying to a friend still left me feeling guilty. While we were talking, it seemed the break time had arrived. Colleagues began wrapping up their work and leaving the office one after another. Some headed to the cafeteria, while others went to the convenience store, each with their own plans. Amid all this, the two of us left the company to visit a nearby ramen shop. As we walked, students passed by in front of us, perhaps finished early due to exam periods or shortened school hours. Those university days feel so nostalgic. I muttered while watching the young people. Tiffany nodded in agreement, saying, "Yeah, that's true." At 33, you start to look back on that time with nostalgia. Back then, even when we messed up, we had adults to step in and help us out. I'm so grateful for that. "You've always been a challenger," I said. Of course, I had so many things I wanted to try. I was lucky to have teachers and mentors who let me explore freely. Tiffany had attended a different university than I had, but she'd clearly made the most of her time there. I knew she participated in study abroad programs, interned at startups, and taken on countless challenges. "But I don't think Travis had the same kind of experience," she added. "What do you mean?" "The other day, I ran into him in one of the company hallways. He wasn't alone. He had this big bodyguard-looking guy with him." "Really? That's interesting." "Yeah, that man was loudly telling Travis, 'If you're going anywhere, let me know.' He spoke as if they'd known each other for years." "I see. Maybe Travis feels trapped by all that." I had only ever known Travis as the tyrant in the office. I'd never considered what his personal life might be like. But if what Tiffany said was true, living under the watchful eye of a bodyguard sounded suffocating. Maybe Travis grew up in an environment where taking risks or making mistakes wasn't allowed. With that somber thought hanging in the air, we walked in silence toward our usual ramen spot. After lunch, we returned to the office just a few minutes before the break ended, only to find my desk in complete disarray. "This is awful. Who could have done this?" For the time being, I asked the people who had been eating their lunch indoors what had happened, but they only turned pale and said nothing. I recognized this reaction immediately. It was the same look I'd seen on colleagues who had been screamed at by Travis. Clearly, they'd been intimidated or threatened into keeping quiet. I turned to a nearby desk where one of my colleagues was sitting and discreetly retrieved the small recorder I'd given him earlier. Tiffany noticed and tilted her head in confusion. "Wait a minute. Isn't that one of those recorders you gave out?" "Yeah. I asked them to keep it on their desks, just in case." "Just in case what? What do you mean?" I explained the recorder in detail to Tiffany, who looked puzzled. After hearing that, Tiffany let out a sigh of admiration, as if it all made sense to her. "Wow, so that's what those little gadgets were for. I just thought you were a recording enthusiast or something." "Hey now, I do like recorders, for the record." Yeah, we can discuss your tech hobbies later. But Travis is going to lose his mind when he finds out about this." I nodded. Travis had run rampant for far too long, mistreating colleagues and abusing his authority. It was finally time to bring all of this to light. The following day, when I arrived at the office, I was immediately summoned along with Travis. The destination was the president's office. After meeting up with Travis along the way, we entered the room. The person sitting at the desk looked directly at us. The man responsible for carrying this company on his shoulders was Mr. Stevens, who also happened to be Travis's uncle. Though he was in his 50s, he maintained a youthful appearance that could easily pass for someone a generation younger. His hair was naturally streaked with gray, and he wore a simple, unadorned suit. At a glance, he might seem like an unassuming middle-aged man. However, he was the exceptional figure who had taken this company from the brink of collapse to rapid growth in just a few years. Travis, seemingly unable to understand why Mr. Stevens had summoned us, glanced around the room in confusion, his gaze wandering restlessly. "Ah, sir, what is this about?" Perhaps unable to endure the heavy atmosphere in the room, Travis stammered as he opened his mouth. In response, Mr. Stevens sighed and looked at Travis's face. "Travis, you've let me down." Saying that, Mr. Stevens pulled out a paper bag, likely from behind his desk. Inside it was the small recorder I had distributed to my colleagues. While I had been working in the sales department, those recorders had been sitting on my colleagues' desks as mere decorations. However, the time had come for them to serve their purpose, so they were all collected at once. "Why are those here?" Unable to keep up with the situation, Travis turned his gaze toward me. His look seemed to ask if I knew something about this. However, I said nothing. Mr. Stevens pulled a small recorder out of the desk drawer. At first glance, it looked like an ordinary recorder. But when Mr. Stevens pressed a small button on its side, the outer casing opened, revealing another even smaller recorder inside. That's... As Travis stared in shock, Mr. Stevens began to explain. As you can see, this is a disguised recorder. Matthew used it to record your words, the countless intolerable insults you hurled. When I listened to them, I had no choice but to reflect on my own foolishness. No, Uncle. It's not like that. This is. Travis's face paled in an instant. With a trembling voice, he spoke to Mr. Stevens. However, even when faced with his panicked nephew, Mr. Stevens showed no sign of being shaken. Be quiet. I don't recall giving you permission to make excuses. At the sound of his uncle's cold voice, Travis let out a startled cry and stepped back. I believed it was my duty to honor my sister's wishes and raise her child without hardship. But it seems I made a mistake. Hearing such unexpectedly personal words, I froze, unsure of how to respond. While I had my own thoughts about Travis, I couldn't pretend to be unaffected when listening to someone's private matters. Besides, I never intended to become the kind of person who takes pleasure in someone else's misfortune. So, I simply didn't know how to react. Travis, you're fired. I gave you the position of department manager because I thought you were capable. But I was wrong. It seems I must now question everything your school records, the praise I once heard from your teachers. Everything having said that, Mr. Stevens shifted his gaze away from his nephew, Travis, and looked at me, his demeanor clearly signaling that the conversation was over. Travis, who had just been informed of his dismissal, whispered in a faint voice, "Wait, please. I'll do better from now on, so forgive me. I'm sorry, Uncle. People don't change so easily. You failed in your role as a manager, and I had no reason to give you another chance." No way. Do you hate me, Uncle? Until now, you've always given me everything I asked for. That was when you were a child, but now you're an adult, and I will treat you as one. He must have realized there was no longer any room for appeal. Hearing those words, Travis clung to Mr. Stevens, sobbing uncontrollably like a child. However, Mr. Stevens said nothing to his nephew and instead turned his gaze toward me. Well done, Matthew. Thanks to you, we avoided what could have been significant damage to this company. You also handled the recent negotiation admirably. I was right to trust you with this task. Thank you, sir. Mr. Stevens had apparently been suspicious for some time of the high number of colleagues in the sales department taking leave. In fact, the reason I ended up working in the overseas business department was due to a secret request from Mr. Stevens. While I was still in the sales department, I received an email from him. The email detailed my transfer to the overseas business department and a certain confidential mission. Mr. Stevens, suspicious about the frequent leaves being taken in the sales department, asked me to uncover the cause. Officially, my move was framed as providing support to the understaffed overseas business department, but in reality, I was tasked with investigating Travis's behavior. That's why I used the recorder to document Travis's actions and words. Now the problem was resolved, and yet, despite everything, I felt a lingering unease, believing that things couldn't stay as they were. I gathered my courage and spoke to Mr. Stevens. "Sir, I know it's not my place, but is there really no way Travis can be given another chance?" Hearing those words, Mr. Stevens looked surprised. After checking on the still crying Travis, he turned his gaze directly to me. "You don't hold any resentment." As a high school dropout, I had to make a difficult choice: be demoted or lose my job. Emma, our new sales manager, announced major changes. From now on, only college graduates would handle deals. The rest of us would be relegated to making coffee or cleaning. Those who objected faced demotion or termination. Emma seemed determined to get rid of me. I knew she had no intention of keeping me around. I was aware of the consequences my departure would have on Smith Corporation, but I decided to resign. True to predictions, chaos ensued at the company. The $700 million deal with Sun Holdings was left in limbo. Emma had no idea that I was the one managing it. She would soon discover the truth. I'm Robert Johnson, 62 years old, working in the sales department at Smith Corporation. Our company, in the wholesale industry, has an annual revenue of $30 billion. My job involves overseeing ongoing deals with regular clients. Though I'm too old for field sales or cold calling, I manage many contracts from my desk, with occasional meetings outside. Emma Davis, the accomplished sales manager, held a grudge. She had risen through the ranks, earning her position through impressive credentials from NYU. Coinciding with my rehire, her promotion likely sparked resentment toward my return after retirement. Approaching my desk, she asked, "How's the work going, Robert?" I responded, "Well, it's probably not making much progress. Reading documents must be challenging with your mature eyesight. About half of eligible retirees are rehired, so my situation was not uncommon." I acknowledged that my eyesight couldn't match the sharp vision of the younger staff, but I kept a calm demeanor. Emma continued, "You should have retired for good. You weren't contributing much even before you left. Is it because you didn't finish high school and can't afford your living costs? You're just stealing a paycheck." I know my lack of a high school diploma affects how others perceive me. In a world that highly values education, being a 60-year-old high school dropout stands out as unusual. It's challenging to be taken seriously when I couldn't even reach a managerial position. Emma had been bringing up this topic for the past 2 years, ever since her own promotion. It was clear she wanted me to leave. She placed a stack of documents on my desk. "Here's some work for you," she said. "You should be grateful." I already had my own tasks, but she seemed to think I wasn't doing enough. I sighed as I saw the overtime hours ahead. "Understand?" she asked. "Surprisingly obedient, aren't you? Even with your long career, being a high school dropout means you have to follow the lead of younger people. I wouldn't want to be in your shoes." The atmosphere in the room turned tense as Emma's dismissive demeanor left me feeling unsettled. Days later, she gathered the sales team and announced startling changes. "From now on, you'll only handle paperwork," she declared. "Make sure to serve tea to the college graduates so they can work comfortably." I tried to interject, "But I have ongoing deals I'm responsible for." Emma swiftly cut me off. "Those deals will be taken over by the college graduates. As a high school dropout, you don't need to worry about them. Now go fetch some tea." Turning to another employee, Emma ordered, "You will be responsible for keeping the entire building spotless, with no dust allowed." When the employee protested about having deals to manage, Emma snapped, "I already told you, the deals will be handled by the college graduates. Don't make me repeat myself." Despite her explanations, the reasoning behind the new assignments remained puzzling to the entire sales department. Sensing our confusion, Emma clarified, "High school dropouts and graduates will handle the grunt work, while college graduates will manage all the deals. This is the most efficient way to work from now on." "Certainly. Does anyone have any issues with that proposal? We're open to hearing thoughts or concerns if anyone has them. The goal is to ensure we're all on the same page and comfortable moving forward. Please feel free to share your perspective if you have any questions or reservations about the plan." Emma glowered at anyone who dared to protest. One employee voiced their concern, "But if we abruptly replace the person leading this, our clients might lose faith in us." "Tush," Emma snapped. "That's why uneducated people are useless. Clients don't trust them and prefer someone else in charge. Can't you see that?" The employee fell silent, unable to counter. Emma added, "If you can't accept these changes, you'll be transferred to our distribution facility in Nebraska. If that's not suitable, you can leave. The room grew still. The distribution center in Nebraska was known for monotonous work, sorting and moving packages all day, with lower pay than the headquarters. Employees would prefer to stay at the headquarters, even if it meant doing mundane tasks like cleaning and making tea. I couldn't fathom how Emma's decision would benefit Smith Corporation. I finally spoke up, unable to hold my tongue any longer. If you change the person leading ongoing deals, it will only increase the client's distrust. There's a rhythm to these transactions. Emma's glare was intense. "What's your issue?" she demanded. I was taken aback by her harshness and could only smile awkwardly. As a non-graduate, I witnessed Emma's victorious grin. Those who leave school early face limited options, either a demotion or being let go. You're past your prime and have no value, so there's no need to keep you around, she asserted, stunning me. It was evident that Emma had consistently singled me out. Whether one holds a high school diploma or not, the result is often relegated to mundane duties. Considering my advanced age only reinforced her desire to have me removed from the workplace. I don't mind working in Nebraska, sorting packages. They often need part-time helpers, so I'm sure they'd be happy to have a full-time employee like me. But if an older person like me, a 60-year-old grandfather, shows up, they might think I'm not the right fit. Emma chuckled. "So, what's your plan then?" I thought about my options. Likely, the CEO and HR department weren't aware of this change. If they knew, they probably wouldn't approve it. Clearly, this was Emma's unilateral decision. I could report it, but I'm tired of her constant hostility. I've saved enough for retirement, so leaving doesn't seem too bad. After a moment, I said, "I'll quit." Emma pretended to be disappointed. "If you wanted to keep working, you should have gone to the distribution center." The other employees were shocked. One of them spoke up. "Wait." "Quiet," Emma interrupted. "Lower-level staff should stay out of this." Emma dismissed the concern. Knowing things would only get worse, I didn't see the point in pointing it out. After being treated so poorly, should I write my resignation letter? Emma agreed. "Yes, do that. For someone your age, you at least know how to handle that." I quickly wrote the resignation letter. I never imagined my departure would happen like this. Regarding the handover process, Emma's response was dismissive. "No need for that. You only handle paperwork anyway." She seemed eager to see me go and even chuckled about it. It was evident she had been anticipating this moment. I thanked her and departed, while the employees appeared concerned, but Emma, content and unaware, didn't seem to notice. Without my presence, chaos would likely ensue, which would now be her responsibility. The next day, as I relaxed at home, Emma persistently called me. Although I had no obligation to answer, her calls were relentless, and I eventually picked up the phone. "Robert, what's going on?" Emma demanded, skipping any pleasantries. Her tone made it clear that the Smith Corporation was facing difficulties. She then proceeded to explain the situation. Apparently, Emma had successfully established a department where only college graduates handled deals. She had managed to divide the workload without the HR department or the CEO's knowledge for some time. Emma was in a cheerful mood, believing everything had gone according to plan. "Please, I need you to handle this $700 million deal with Sun Holdings. They have $10 billion in annual revenue, and continuing this relationship will bring substantial profits to our company." The silence in the room was deafening after her words. "Isn't the $700 million deal today? All our deals are now overseen by university-educated professionals. It's bound to succeed, so no need to be anxious." The employees exchanged uneasy glances. One of my former coworkers hesitantly informed manager Emma. He resigned yesterday. "What? You're saying he was in charge of the $700 million deal?" Emma's face fell. "There's no way an inexperienced person could manage something so significant. You must be lying." But the employees knew the truth, which they couldn't change. My former colleague had a UCLA degree, and Emma believed a college graduate's word was gospel. She decided to reassign the deal. You have a UCLA diploma, right? You can handle it, can't you? Emma pressed. When he hesitated, he eventually admitted quietly, I think the client will only be satisfied if it's Robert. Enough. If I say do it, then do it. If an uneducated dropout can manage it, so can you. Emma's frustration was evident. The young man reluctantly agreed. When he contacted the client, they insisted on me. He reported back to Emma, I told you. The client wants Robert. Emma was stunned. How could they possibly want someone like him, a high school dropout? What can he contribute, especially without the energy to make sales? She questioned. One of my colleagues responded, Aren't you aware of Robert's impressive career? His resume may be sparse, but he's highly respected in the industry. Many major companies work with us because of him. Emma, a recent graduate at 22 who had been in the same department for 20 years, had focused solely on my lack of formal education, disregarding my reputation. Since she disliked me, no one mentioned my background in her presence. What do you mean? Emma asked. If you only look at resumes, you might not know his background. But Robert is extremely well known. Many large companies do business with us because of him. My colleague explained, I can't discuss this further, but you should contact Robert. Realizing it was inappropriate to reveal more, my colleague stopped. Emma, who had fired me the day before, was now calling me in desperation. What's happening? She asked, clearly furious. I decided to explain. It's true my name is somewhat known in the industry. I inherited my sales talent from my grandfather, who was also a CEO. Because of him, many companies continue to do business with me. Nearly 40 years ago, I handled major deals with top trading companies. I was considered a legendary salesman back then. My story began in middle school. My grandfather was the CEO of Johnson Corporation, a conglomerate with annual revenues over $1 billion. I admired him deeply and helped out during vacations, doing tasks like making tea and cleaning. Though these tasks seemed menial, I was thrilled to be part of his company. When it was time to choose a path, while others went on to further education, I was determined to work at my grandfather's company. It was a reckless decision, but I was serious. I convinced my parents and grandfather to let me work and study simultaneously. I joined Johnson Corporation right after middle school and continued doing basic tasks until I was 20. I loved every moment of it. When I finally moved into sales, the excitement was overwhelming. My journey wasn't smooth. Securing contracts was challenging, and my approach needed refining. But I didn't give up. Eventually, I secured my first contract. The sense of achievement was immense. I finally felt like a true salesman. My skills really took off, and by 25, I'd landed a major deal with a big company. This was a turning point. I understood the key to success and started securing contracts with major firms. Rumors spread that working with me always meant profit, and soon, deals were flowing my way. I made it a point to understand clients' needs and offer tailored solutions, which likely contributed to their profits. Seeing my success rate, the sales manager began assigning me important deals. Companies started requesting me by name, and I closed those deals, building trust both within and outside the company. I became the top salesman, and even executives from major companies knew my name. My performance earned praise and headhunting offers from other firms. Despite this, I stayed at Johnson Corporation because I loved my grandfather's company. I ensured every deal was profitable, and many salespeople admired me. Though I never boasted, I knew I was considered a legend. When my grandfather retired at 75, the executive vice president took over as CEO. My father wasn't interested in the company, and I was too young to become CEO at 27. As the company restructured, things started to change. Johnson Corporation, the company I'd known since middle school, was no more. I felt sad seeing the changes daily and began considering a fresh start elsewhere. I decided to leave after properly handing over my responsibilities. Despite many offers from major companies, I joined Smith Corporation at 36. Since then, I've been working in sales here, but I've stepped back from prominent roles to let the younger generation shine. I explained Smith Corporation's current situation. All major clients are ones I secured, so it's no surprise they won't proceed without me. I manage so many deals that I didn't have time for administrative duties, which is why I didn't hold a formal position, though my salary was on par with managers. I was gradually passing on my responsibilities to younger employees, but being suddenly forced to resign meant I couldn't properly say goodbye or complete the handover. It's no wonder clients are saying they won't continue their deals. Emma was furious. "Why didn't you mention this sooner?" she demanded. "I did ask if a handover was necessary," I replied, "but if it's that important, you should have made it clear." She then told me I needed to inform the clients about the handover and assure them to continue doing business with Smith Corporation. I refused. Building trust is fundamental in business. If I tell clients about internal issues after resigning, they'll lose trust, and the deals will end quickly. Smith Corporation's annual revenue is $3 billion, but $15 billion comes from the deals I secured. The damage is $700 million, and at this rate, the company could hit rock bottom. "Come back to Smith Corporation," Emma said. "I'll talk to HR. Report to work immediately." I declined. "Even if I come back, you'll just treat me like a burden again. I can't work under someone who judges people solely by their resume and educational background." Emma's frustration was palpable. She realized the major deals were secured through my connections and was terrified of losing them. That's why she was desperate to bring me back despite having fired me. I decided to be honest. Every day, I was insulted for being a high school dropout. I was pushed aside. I can't work under someone who only values resumes and education. Even if I agree to restore the deals, you'd just see me as a burden again. Emma might change, but I doubted it. Her inability to earn trust was her own fault. "Is that all? Since I've retired, I'd like to relax." Before she could respond, I hung up and blocked her number. Later, I heard that Smith Corporation was in serious trouble. Not only was the $700 million deal affected, but I was also managing other major deals worth $500 million and $1 billion. When I missed those meetings, clients grew suspicious. Upon checking with Smith Corporation employees, they discovered I had retired. As a result, clients began terminating their contracts, saying there was no point in continuing without me. Smith Corporation started losing its major clients one after another. While we could salvage smaller deals, losing several major ones was a significant blow. A week later, Mr. Smith, the CEO, called me in. I wouldn't have responded to manager Emma's summons, but Mr. Smith was different. He had supported me for nearly 30 years. When I arrived at the office, I saw Emma sitting dejectedly in the corner and Mr. Smith, looking troubled at his desk. He sighed deeply. We had no idea she changed the sales department's operations. The suggestion of her demotion was unauthorized. I'm truly sorry for what happened. Please don't worry about it, Mr. Smith. You've always been good to me, I said, turning to Emma. Apologize to him. I'm very sorry, Emma said, barely holding back tears. Clearly, Mr. Smith had severely reprimanded her. The changes she made were without any approval, and I felt sorry for Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith continued, Our company is in serious trouble. We're losing major contracts rapidly. If this continues, our business will falter. We can still rescind your resignation if you're willing to come back. I don't mind returning, but I have one condition. What is it? Mr. Smith asked, looking concerned. I looked at Emma, whose expression had turned pale. You're fired, Emma. Emma immediately objected. Wait, you don't need to go that far. Do you realize the impact of your actions on me and the sales department? I asked her. This is a large company. If you lose your job, finding a similar position elsewhere will be extremely difficult. But I've always been a valuable asset to this company. I graduated from a prestigious university and have consistently been a top performer. How can you fire me based solely on your own judgment? Enough, Mr. Smith commanded. Unwilling to accept her termination, Emma persisted. Wait, Mr. Smith. Dismissing me is unfair. I've contributed to this company since I joined as a new graduate. Do you comprehend the consequences of your decision? Mr. Smith glared at Emma. You made unilateral changes without considering the impact on employees. Silence. Emma fell silent. I then addressed her. I may be older now, and my strength has diminished, but there's a limit to how much disrespect I can tolerate. Although I'm a high school dropout, that allowed me to learn the company's ways early and gain sales expertise faster than anyone. You mocked me without understanding my circumstances. Emma trembled. Your current job duties are unacceptable. If you allow me, I can return, handle the transition, and apologize to our clients, but only if you step down. In that case, I'm content to remain retired. The responsibility for all my work will be on you. Truthfully, I'm fine with either option, as I've saved enough for my retirement. What's your decision? Can you do it now? Mr. Smith considered my proposal. Emma, biting her lip in frustration, realized she couldn't rectify this mistake without me. As more contracts were canceled, she was overcome with despair. Unable to respond, she stood in silence. Mr. Smith nodded. Very well, she will be terminated. Pleading, Emma said, Please wait. I've contributed greatly to this company. Your hasty actions have nearly caused a $15 billion loss. Do you comprehend that? Faced with Mr. Smith's stern rebuke, she shrank back. Write your resignation letter and leave. Don't return tomorrow. Emma, understanding the situation, tearfully drafted her resignation letter. She then departed from Smith Corporation, never to return. Despite her education, Emma struggled to find a new job as news of her responsibility for my resignation had spread. Even when she managed to secure interviews, her arrogance led to her applications being rejected, leaving her unemployed for 6 months. Humbled by the numerous rejections, Emma eventually settled for a part-time position, earning a fraction of her previous income at Smith Corporation. As for me, I returned to Smith Corporation and began taking charge of major contracts, apologizing to clients along the way. Employees, initially concerned about the future, felt reassured by my return. News of my comeback spread, and with my sincere apologies, we successfully restored major contracts. It became evident that Emma had been quite arrogant in her dealings with clients, and they found it easier to work with us after her dismissal. Smith Corporation became easier to manage than before. I plan to retire at 65, and if the transition continues smoothly, the company will expand its business even after my departure. My career will end on a high note. Although I had left my grandfather's company, I am grateful to have joined this one. With my remaining years dwindling, I'm determined to put in my utmost effort and conclude my sales journey on a triumphant note. I want to pour my heart into my work and finish strong, leaving behind a lasting legacy of success.
It's embarrassing that our eldest only finished high school, while the younger one achieved so much. The voice that demeaned me belonged to my mother at our family home. My father nodded along, and my brother, caught in the middle, beamed proudly knowing he was being praised. My brother went to a prestigious university, while I started working after graduating high school. My parents always praised my brother, calling him an elite who had made efforts. Why did such a gap form between us? I am Nicole, a 26-year-old web designer. Born in a somewhat rural town, I lived with my grandparents, parents, and younger brother, Sean. Sean was the long-awaited boy, born 7 years after me, and naturally, our parents adored him. They always prioritized his needs and whims over mine, often leaving me feeling neglected. Moreover, our parents never treated us equally. For Sean's birthday, they'd give him big toys as gifts, but since my birthday was close to Christmas, I'd get just one gift combined for both occasions. Usually something educational like study tools. When Sean started playing soccer as a club activity, our parents attended every practice and game to support him. I was in the tennis club during middle school, but even at my final match before retiring, neither parent came because they had to drive Sean around. There were days I felt like crying, but Sean comforted me. He even said to our parents, "That's not true. Nicole is smarter and she even teaches me. She is really amazing." And a few days after my last match, he made me a small bouquet from flowers he picked in the park, showing his gentle nature. Our grandparents also found our parents' favoritism excessive, and often reprimanded them, but by the time I graduated high school, both had passed away one after the other. Sean always stood up for me, but especially our mother didn't find it amusing. She grew strict with him, threatening, "If you keep siding with your sister, I'll make you stand outside." Especially as winter began and snow started falling. I didn't want my much younger brother to suffer, so all I could say was, "You don't have to worry about me anymore." Eventually, Sean stopped defending me, and under our parents' protection, he enjoyed his days filled with sports and studies. After our grandparents' consecutive funerals, my parents simply refused to let me go to university due to a lack of savings. I had wanted to study design, but that was not allowed, and I had to find a job immediately after high school. However, as a final act of defiance, I left our hometown for an office job at a design firm that handled websites for beauty salons and nail shops. Although it was a small company, I couldn't give up on my dream, and managed to get a position as a designer's assistant. While doing office work, I observed the professional designers daily. The harsh reality was difficult, but it only motivated me more to become a web designer myself. My alone time for study became precious. I minimized visits home because whenever I did, my parents would mock me. So I stayed away and spent weekends studying design and enhancing my software skills through online courses. This effort was recognized at work, and one day, I was integrated into the design team. My dedication was well known among the designers, who introduced me to useful materials and connections. By the 3rd year, I had grown enough to be trusted with jobs as a web designer. 8 years after high school, as I became accustomed to my job as a web designer, news of Sean's college entrance exams arrived. He aimed for a famous private university in the city, aspiring to enter its medical school. Thanks to his diligent studies, his success was almost guaranteed. Recalling our childhood, I wanted to support him if possible and told him so. A few months later, Sean passed and got into the famous medical university. I congratulated him warmly. "Sean, I'm truly happy for you. I heard how hard you worked, attending tutorials daily." Sean thanked me modestly, but then I received a particular request. Actually, the private medical school requires a donation. It's optional, but Dad and Mom say we'd be looked down upon if we didn't contribute because we're from the countryside. It's better to pay, right? But you know our family's just scraping by with my tuition. and living expenses for college. Sean said he would earn some of his living expenses through part-time jobs. But I knew the immense study load waiting for him in medical school would make that difficult. I wanted to contribute. But with our father being a regular employee and our mother working only twice a week, it was a stretch. The tuition for a private medical university was hard enough. They probably counted on using my savings, which they should have just stated outright. Despite deepening my disdain for our parents, I readily agreed to his request and helped with the donation and related expenses for his entrance. Thus, Sean moved to an apartment close to his university, and his new life began. The place where Sean lived wasn't far from my house, so he could rely on me any time. Maybe he was enjoying his university life too much, as his replies to me were always curt. Yet he would contact me asking for things like, "I want to eat this," or "I need this, please send it." So I found myself sending parcels or lending money, doing financial favors our parents couldn't. We occasionally went out to eat as siblings, but even then, Sean was unresponsive, ignoring me and fiddling with his smartphone, except during meals. Whatever I asked, the only response was, "I'm busy with my studies." His indifferent reactions left me increasingly perplexed. At some point, he began to treat me coldly. Even today's dinner felt like I was forcing him to join me. To lighten the mood, I brought up our home in a deliberately cheerful tone. "Well, I guess Mom and Dad are just happy seeing you doing well." Suddenly, Sean looked at me sharply and distorted his face as if to scoff through his nose. "Of course. I'm at a famous medical university. And you are just a high school grad designer, right? They aren't worried about you at all. You have a job that doesn't even need qualifications." His harsh words made me feel the blood drain from my face. "What do you mean by no qualifications?" "Just what it sounds like, a web designer, right? Nowadays, anyone can do that with a little search on the internet. Some of my classmates can even create websites. Aren't you embarrassed by such a job? Maybe you should study a bit and get some qualifications. Though that might be tough with just a high school brain." "Sean, what's gotten into you?" "I study seriously for my job. Don't mock me without knowing anything." Sean glared at me irritably and grimaced. "Dad and Mom say it every day on the phone. They say it's great how the eldest son got into medical school. But it's embarrassing that their older daughter only finished high school. I'm contacting you and going out to eat with you because they asked me to. Just so the embarrassing sister won't feel too inferior. The future renowned doctor has to take care of you, they say." My parents have always compared me to Sean. He was smart and kind, a reliable brother, but they would directly say to me, "Nicole, you're stupid and slow, and you're not thoughtful." Those memories flash back, making it difficult for me to breathe. Dizziness struck me from the shock, and I lowered my head to endure it. Yet, thinking I was crying, Sean just chuckled lightly and said, "I'm leaving now," then stood up and left. Having gained the freedom of college life, Sean had changed completely. Surrounded by geniuses that he never had back home probably affirmed the praise he received from our parents. Daily hearing from them that Sean is a real genius. And he will definitely become a great doctor, it's no wonder he believed it all. They included plenty of derogatory remarks about me in those praises, which influenced Sean too. Around Christmas, as usual, I went back home for a visit. I was told to bring Sean, who still maintained his attitude of ignoring me. This was his first visit back since he started studying and practicing intensely. Perhaps that's why, as soon as we arrived, my parents clung to him and ignored me. Home was ready with luxurious dishes waiting for Sean, and at night, a big party was held with neighbors, relatives, and Sean's former classmates who remained in the area. Caught up in the atmosphere, Sean began loudly bragging to everyone around. "Mom keeps saying to come back home. But I'm studying at that famous private university, what's more, in the medical faculty. It's understandable I can't come back often. Plus, studying at the medical faculty isn't something I can do alone. We need to work in teams, so if I'm the only one to return home, it puts everyone else in a tough spot. Everyone comes to me with their questions, so give me a break." I was in the kitchen, pretending to prepare dishes, but I could hear Sean's loud brags clearly. Though our parents and relatives, who had always lavishly praised Sean, might ignore it. The neighbors and former classmates probably didn't appreciate his boastful talk. Perhaps tired of his grandstanding, a man in my neighborhood brought up a conversation, maybe thinking to do me a favor. "By the way, Nicole is also working hard, isn't she? In design, I believe." But Sean and our parents unanimously and flatly denied it. "No way, Nicole is hopeless. She seems to be trying, but..." "That's right, our eldest is just a high school grad, which is quite embarrassing. There's a big gap between her and Sean." In a room filled with former classmates and neighbors with high school diplomas, it's surprising how Nicole can still come home. Laughing loudly, Sean continued as both our parents chuckled. I was just frozen, feeling a rush of anger rising the next moment. "Good for you, Nicole. From next year, you won't have to show your face here anymore." "Understood," I managed to say, my voice trembling. Despite the apologetic faces of the onlookers. "If you say so, I'll take you up on that. I'm never coming back here again." The anger inside me bubbled like magma, but the words that came out were utterly cold. "Don't ever show your face here again." On the way to the station, I nearly screamed, holding back the overwhelming emotions. My parents had, at least to some extent, worked and raised 2 children. If I valued my career, I couldn't maintain such relationships. Several months after my decision, just as the new academic year was about to begin. "Hey, what's happening with my tuition fees?" Sean's voice was tentative, tinged with panic. I responded calmly. "I supported last year's. The entrance fee, donation, and first year's tuition, remember? That's not it. I mean for the second year. This year's fees, they're urging me from the university to pay soon." "What's going on?" "What do you mean, what's going on? I never said I'd pay." I could tell Sean was speechless on the other end. "Actually, I was only supposed to pay for the donation, right? That can't be." "But you know, my living expenses. My ability to save significantly stemmed from switching to a major design firm. Having informed my family about my job change. Days later, I also refused further contact with my parents. Sean's calls became daily, filled with whining. If there had been a sincere apology. Among the messages, there were astonishing ones. People who look down on others shouldn't become doctors. With this, I cut off all contact with my family and welcomed a new season. I had been supporting not only my brother's tuition but also sending money home. Although my brother was talented, he had squandered any substantial money. One day, perhaps stressed, my father caused an incident on the bus during his commute. My mother tried to work, but with only limited part-time experience. My parents attempted to contact me through relatives. but the content they wanted mediated was invariably demanding and authoritative in tone. The relatives recognized that the problem lay with my parents, and gradually they asked me not to worry about it, and ceased communicating on their behalf. This led to a thinning of ties with my family, allowing me to return to a peaceful life. According to the relatives, bad rumors were circulating about my brother, who had become a recluse, and my unemployed father, whose unsavory appearance further alienated them. Unable to bear the situation, my mother eventually disappeared from view and now, I'm told, is uncontactable. Left behind, they survive meagerly on welfare, without any income. Warm interactions with neighbors might have offered some solace, but given their behavior, it's unlikely they receive much sympathy from those around them. As for me, my career in design is progressing well. I have secured participation in significant projects that will prominently feature my name. Using this as a stepping stone, I've launched a long-held plan, that is, preparing for university entrance exams. As funds accumulate smoothly and my current work stabilizes, I plan to begin this new challenge. I'm also considering setting up my own business, wanting to learn not only about design but also about management. I'm excited about these new ventures.